We live in an age of artificial intelligence, and businesses and professions across the world are rapidly integrating the use of AI into their practices. The media industry is also no different. Earlier this year, in fact, the News Media Alliance in the United States, which represents over 2,000 news publishers, took a very critical view, in fact, of AI developers and their use of journalism. Now, Google has an AI feature called AI Overviews, which was launched in May this year. Simply put, if you type a query in a Google search box, AI Overviews will compile through an aggregation of multiple web inputs a response right on top of your search page. Now take this example, which is visible on your screen. It's a search result to a query about the top semiconductor stocks, and what you see is an AI Overviews generated response on top of the page. The rest of the responses are below those AI generated entries. The problem, according to many in the journalistic and publishing fraternity, is that these AI generated search results right on top of the page disincentivize users from scrolling down to portals or news articles or web pages that might be the original sources of that information, or may have done a far better job in answering your query, and more accurately as well, by way of a news article, for example. If you are the author of a news item that now gets pushed down in Google's search results because its own AI feature provides an answer right on top of the page, would you really be happy? Are there copyright issues involved here? And crucially, in a cutthroat environment where monetization is based on the number of clicks and page views, is Google's AI Overviews feature undermining a level playing field? Another criticism is that a lot of these AI Overviews generated responses have also been inaccurate. Let's take this across to our guests for their perspective on this very interesting story. Well, we're currently joined by Dr. Michael Owens, Mayor of Mableton and President of the U.S. Global Center for Cyber Policy. He's joining us from Mableton in the United States. Febin John James, Head of AI Innovations at TARS, also joins us. We're also joined by Mr. Robert Potter, Senior Fellow at the Australian National University. Mr. Pawan Duggal, Cyber Law Advocate, also joins us from the National Capital here in Delhi. And Advocate Virag Gupta, also a cyber law expert, joins us on the show as well. Many thanks, gentlemen, for speaking to Times Now on this very interesting debate. Dr. Owens, if I could come to you first, how do you view this debate as a cyber law professional yourself, sir?
Yeah, well, hello, thanks for allowing me for being on again. You know, I think this really comes back to all of this one clip where it said that our content is now being forced to compete with our content, which I think is a really telling aspect of what the problem is. But, you know, as we said before, AI is exciting, it's new, it's innovative, and we also know it's here to stay. One of the things we continue to say is we don't know how it will continue to impact other areas. And this is one that we're obviously seeing now. You know, with the power of AI comes responsibility. And I think that is where we are really focusing on, with the accuracy, the fairness, and the data privacy that has to be prioritized. But also we know the issue about the smaller publishers and how they potentially could be impacted with this, and the increase of market dominance and the anti-competition issues that this raises as well.
Let me take that across to Mr. Potter as well. Mr. Potter, now a lot of us use Google for searches. Google might have an argument where it might say that if you're using my search tool to make a query, then I have the right to generate an AI response right on top of the page. How I preference that response is up to me, since you're availing of Google services in typing out your search. Is that a valid response? Do you think, is that a defense on the part of Google that is legitimate, or is Google still crossing a line in your view?
So Google is trying to keep you on its platform because, like the media companies that are under pressure from being drawn into the Google platform, Google is trying to keep people on its platform as well, because now AI is unleashing a revolution of content creation through other platforms that have arguably had significantly more success in generating news summaries, for example, ChatGPT. So what Google's trying to do is play a middle ground point where the news feed is still available to a user, but they're keeping people within the Google platform. And this is kind of a middle zone for them to start going through this experiment. We don't know how it's going to play out yet. I think with AI, it's always a case you want to slow down the regulation, increase the innovation. Yes, it's going to have winners and losers. The media has been, like traditional media outlets have been losing on a range of fronts. AI is just the latest hammer to hit them. But Google itself is under significant threat because of the pressure put on it by ChatGPT. Why do you need to search for an answer if you can get an answer by typing it into ChatGPT?
Mr. James, now Google's response when it was specifically asked a question about the anxieties of those in the media industry or publishers for that matter, Google actually said that AI overviews will conceptually match information that appears in top web results, including those linked in the overview. This information is not a replacement for web content, but designed to help people get a sense of what's out there and click to learn more. Now, this was a query that was answered by Google following an article that was written in the web portal Wired. Do you believe that this is a valid response, Mr. James?
I don't think it's a valid response, primarily because we can see that past they have abused as a monopoly in multiple times. Example is Google Alex as well. The other perspective is that you can see Twitter last time they have censored content as well. So it is anti-journalistic as well. So their response is not justified. And the last point which I want to argue with is that have a collaboration with the publisher. You're using some of the content stealing actually, right? Why not collaborate with them and come to a term and then try to work together instead of like, hey, it's my way or the highway, right? That's my perspective.
Mr. Duggal, what are the legal implications of this in a country like India? Do you believe that this makes a case for certain copyright laws to be invoked?
Clearly, when Google is providing these services in India, it qualifies as an intermediary under Section 21W of the Information Technology Act 2000. That being so, it's required to exercise due diligence while it discharges its obligations as an intermediary under the Indian IT law, thanks to Section 79. Now, the Government of India has already stipulated and implemented the Information Technology Rules 2021, which mandate that service providers like Google have to not just inform their users that they will go and respect the copyright, trademark and other intellectual property rights of others, but more significantly, will also take reasonable steps to prevent the users from doing an activity which tantamounts to infringement of copyright, trademark or other intellectual property rights. That being so, when Google is going to provide these kind of services, it's already going to come up in a gray zone. Yes, Google is betting its bet on the fact that India does not yet have a dedicated law on artificial intelligence. But Google has to realize that the Government of India has already come up with the two notifications, being 1st of March 2024 and 16th of March 2024, issued by the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, which in any case are stipulating these AI providers like Google to ensure that they are in compliance with the applicable law. Now, once you're going to offer services which are in the gray zone, the chances of such services being potentially challenged in courts of law or the potentiality of criminal exposure emanating out of such acts cannot be ruled out. We have to realize that India is a very litigious society.
Correct.
And it's only going to take the scent of a wind for people to start their litigations in the Indian context. So a lot of work has to be done. The laws are not up to the mark. And because the laws are not up to date, service providers like Google are currently trying to go and exploit the areas in the gray zone.
Okay.
Now, but as things pass by, I expect more clarity, more litigation, and more regulation. But Indian government has made it very clear that they don't want to bring in regulation at the cost of innovation. We are here to promote innovation, but also look at minimal regulation so that there is some sanity of law, of rule of law, when it comes to the AI ecosystem.
There shouldn't be overreach. That's the point that you're making. Advocate Virag Gupta, do you believe that this also is a practice, the AI feature specifically, that can be interpreted in some circles as anti-competition or anti-competitive? And I ask you this because the news media industry is increasingly going online. In India, there are approximately 820 million internet users in our country, and about 75 to 80% of the news content, as per the latest figures, is actually consumed online. So if an AI generative tool puts out certain search responses right on top of a page, preferencing those responses over others, do you believe this is anti-competition?
33 to 50% of the news traffic goes through the Google. That is the one thing. And from Indian perspective, we have to see the three legal aspects. Number one, as an intermediary, these companies are availing all the exemptions but not fulfilling any of the obligations which is mandated in the IT rules. That is the one thing. Secondly, India does not have a dedicated regulator to handle such type of things. Number three, we don't have any AI related specific law, and today's news is there the digital competition bill, which is 41-page draft, is going to be passed next year. So when the things are moving so fast, so our response as being the biggest market for these tech companies is not as per the expectations of the economy and to save the sovereignty of democratic system. Now this whole thing is impacting the media, which is the fourth pillar of constitution. Now coming to the copyright laws only the aggrieved party can sue Google like companies. And we have to see that long back there was a discussion how to do the revenue sharing with the Google. Okay. And we have yet not taken any strong action. So to protect the media, to protect the journalism, to protect the authenticity of news, government has to come with the dedicated laws to handle Google's not only the monopoly, sure. Number two, different type of corporate structures by which they are monopolize the whole thing, and this whole problem has to read with the US latest antitrust law and European Union and UK latest mandate, and we have yet not imposed any heavy fine or penalty which is recovered from these tech giants.
Dr. Owens, in your country, the Department of Justice has actually taken Google to court over what it perceives as being anti-competitive practices in the ad tech space. Now, that's a separate controversy involving Google, but in this specific case that we're discussing today about AI responses and the AI overviews feature, you did talk about the importance of accurate information in your earlier response, and what this particular feature has actually been criticized for, including from members in the news industry in the United States, is the lack of accurate results that this particular feature has actually thrown up to certain responses. Now, Google has said that it's trying to work on this and that it's updating its tools constantly to give as accurate a response as possible. But do you still believe that this is a work in progress, and is it a serious matter of concern?
I absolutely believe it's still a work in progress. And one of the biggest challenges we have and one of the biggest risks out there is the spread of misinformation. And you know, most users, the biggest challenge of this tool is that they will see it as the first thing that shows up on the search result, and many users will never go any further than that. So the biggest risk here is that if that information is incorrect, that is information that regular users, that business owners, that students, that anyone will grab and you know, take that as the accurate response that they're getting from the internet and assume that it's true. So, you know, along with the other issues we talked about, you know, Google's also been sued for data privacy, as it's taken, you know, millions of users' information and it somehow found its way into, you know, this set of data that it then will use to aggregate and put responses back. So there's just a misinformation aspect that comes along with it, but there's also the data privacy concerns that once information that should not get into the AI engine gets in there, that is then going to use that as well and send that information globally to millions and millions of users.
Mr. Potter, now Google might also end up saying that we live in an age of depleting attention spans, and also there is an urge to consume information at a pace much faster than it had been done earlier. So Google is actually doing what it can to keep up with the times, and if it's generating an artificial intelligence-based response that basically constricts or summarizes a piece of information within a few consumable words for a viewer who may not in all instances be a journalist. Of course, the media fraternity has been complaining about this, but not everyone who goes on to Google to consume a piece of information is necessarily looking for in-depth information. If there is a short summary of a particular news story or a news development that is summed up for a particular user in a few hundred words right on top of a page by using an AI response, what's really the problem with that? How would you respond to that kind of an argument coming from the other side?
So I think there's something to that. When one looks at Google as a search platform, it comes across as a gigantic monopoly. But when it comes across as a part of the AI industry, it's not a monopoly. It's actually just an emerging part of a growing industry where it's actually quite a small player. Obviously, they're investing heavily, and they see it as necessary to continue to maintain their competitive position in the market to invest into artificial intelligence. Now, that being said, they're going to get things wrong, particularly in the early stages of the platform, right? Because AI models take a very long amount of time to train. The only way you can realistically test an AI model at the scale they're trying to prove it out is to do it in production on their website, but still give people the opportunity to go below and click to the links to the stories in the old way if they would prefer. But this is a really interesting example of a big company in one space trying to enter a new space. But it doesn't necessarily mean they should be regulated like a monopoly on day one, because in this space they're not. But they are attempting to keep things on the platform, to keep their platform interesting, to keep their platform innovative. And they're going to have to keep putting in a lot more effort if they're going to stay in front, because at the end of the day, it may be the case that Google goes the way of the broadsheet newspaper front page, and people just start looking elsewhere for an aggregation of their news. But we'll see how things play out. I wouldn't be in a hurry to regulate it on day one.
Mr. James, do you think there is a compelling case here for regulation? Because like Mr. Pawan Duggal warned, one should not, of course, indulge in overreach when it comes to matters of this nature. Right balance needs to be struck. What do you think that right balance is, Mr. James?
Having to heard from Potter, I would just say that I disagree with him on this aspect that Google does have an unfair advantage because traffic comes through Google and no other AI player has this particular advantage. Having said that, when it comes to regulation part of it, I think Google still has to be answerable in such a way that they could potentially release the early version to a small set of users instead of making it public to everyone. So there is some kind of regulation or self-regulation which needs to come out so that they don't take advantage of their monopoly, especially because of their past. So regulation at some level, at self-regulatory level, or at a government level is needed, and all of the governments like Australia has been doing it, so India also should do it.
Mr. Duggal, is this a case of a monopoly flexing its muscles, so to speak, or is this also a case of so-called competitors to Google not really measuring up?
Well, very quickly you have to realize that post-COVID-19, we have actually entered into a new age. This is the age of the new cyber world order. And a new essential element of the new cyber world order is that states are getting more powerful. So if you're wanting to perpetuate monopolies for the rest of the coming times, you're obviously mistaken, because the winds of change are blowing. Today, regulators are not hesitating in examining the dominant position of dominant players and working in the direction of having a fair, a level playing field for all players in the digital ecosystem. That's what is the trend that's emerging in America when an American judge has ruled against Google. That's what has emerged in India when a complaint against Google has come up with before the Competition Commission of India. And that's what has emerged in the UK after the recent UK watchdog's interim finding on the Google domination. Now, therefore, the bottom line is that I think even if you're a dominant player, you will have to change your mindset and say, let me allow a level playing field so that at least I can avoid the microscopic scrutiny from various regulators. Otherwise, this scrutiny is going to continue to happen in almost every jurisdiction. And also now, let's realize it, as one of our panelists talked about, the AI ecosystem is already a level playing field, where Google is one of the many players that are existing. But in case if it wants to arm twist its dominant search position and to leverage the benefits in the context of AI, that's something that's not likely to be taken very kindly either by the competitors nor by the regulators. But clearly, we are still work in progress. There's no prima facie finding, but yes, with growing winds of change coming in, players like Google will have to be sensitized that, look, you will have to start respecting the competition laws that are prevalent in different jurisdictions and ensure compliance. You'll have to comply with the relevant cyber laws so that you can continue to take the benefits of the statutory exemption from legal liability. But any kind of a misuse of the dominant position could automatically lead to you losing your statutory exemption from legal liability and thereby exposing you and your company to large number of untoward consequences, legal, civil and criminal. So it will be interesting to see how the actual position evolves with the passage of time.
Advocate Gupta, now Mr. Duggal, of course, talked about the rules that pertain to intermediaries. Now, we have the digital IT rules as well, and India's government has been quite insistent that intermediaries cannot expect to be flouting these norms. They have to follow the law of the land. At the same time, you did speak of a certain lacunae in our legal infrastructure when it comes to addressing issues such as AI. Where do we go from here as far as legislation is concerned, while also ensuring that there's no legal overreach as well?
Two things are there. First is in 2013-2014, in K.N. Govindacharya matter, in Delhi High Court, order was passed that all these intermediary companies have to appoint the grievance officer in India. Now, this AI legal entity of the Google has to appoint a grievance officer for India so that Indian authorities and regulators can ascertain what type of misinformations are there. Now, the second aspect is these incorrect informations needs to be investigated by the Indian agencies, like what has been done in the European Union and USA, and we have to ascertain, number one, whether this is a genuine incorrect information or misinformation or suppressed information or paid misinformation or targeted misinformation. Now, accordingly, we have to understand that what are the commercial gain of the Google by way of these incorrect informations and misinformation. And US, we have seen that how Google search results and the social media is impacting the president election. In the same manner, they have impacted the previous elections in India. So Election Commission has to take cognizance of these misinformations. Press Council of India has to take the cognizance, and TRAI and MeitY should take the necessary action as per the IT intermediary rules which have been made as per the Section 79 of the IT Act. So that a strong signal should go against these tech giants that India is not only a big market, but we respect rule of law also.
Dr. Owens, a final question to you before we let you go. How do you see this now evolving in the United States? There are multiple lawsuits, including one, of course, pertaining to the ad tech space and Google's anti-competitive practices allegedly prevalent there. And now, of course, what you're seeing with AI overviews, with the news media associations there up in arms.
Yeah, I'll go back to the fact that what we're seeing with tech giants is this continuous push for market dominance, for how they're having the push to continue to play in this AI market and to continue to innovate in that space. And I think that's something that we'll continue to see, but it does raise serious concerns about misinformation. We talked about market dominance, data privacy, and it's really just crucial that when we look at items around accuracy, transparency, fair competition, and when and how they're innovating. Ultimately, I think the regulatory aspect of this, which we're seeing in the U.S. and we'll continue to see here as well as globally, to me, it's really about ensuring that AI benefits everyone, right, without compromising integrity or fairness when it comes to this digital ecosystem, which we're all playing in.
Right. Dr. Robbins, Mr. James, Mr. Potter, Mr. Duggal and Mr. Gupta. There was a very insightful discussion. Many thanks for your participation. We'll see how this evolves, not just in the United States, but also now in India, the possible ramifications of not just the AI overviews feature as well, but monopoly and anti-competition and anti-competitive practices allegedly that this giant is now involved in. Many thanks for your participation in this. That's an end to this debate.